Why do some people build lasting wealth, while others with higher incomes stay broke? It's not intelligence. It's not luck. It's behavior. Money isn't a math equation. It's psychology. In today's episode of the Wealthy Mind podcast, we're breaking down the powerful lessons from The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, a book that reveals why discipline beats IQ, why survival matters more than returns, and why true wealth is invisible. If you want to become financially unbreakable, this episode is for you. Let's begin.
I want to start today with a scenario that honestly sounds like a glitch in the Matrix.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's this central mystery of money that I can't quite wrap my head around it. How is it possible that a genius mathematician, someone who understands probability better than literally anyone on Earth,
Right.
how does that guy go completely broke while, say, a janitor who never even went to college can die a multimillionaire?
It does sound like a riddle, doesn't it? Because in almost any other field like medicine or engineering, computer science, the person with the higher IQ and the better education wins.
Every time.
Exactly. You don't see untrained hobbyists accidentally performing better heart surgery than a cardiologist.
Right. You don't just luck into building a bridge that stays up.
No, you don't. But in finance, it happens all the time. The soft skills, things like patience, emotional control, self-awareness, they often beat raw intelligence. And that is a terrifying thought for really smart people.
It's terrifying because we all, we like to think we can just outsmart the system, and that is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We have a really fascinating stack of sources for you today. First, we're looking at a pretty heavy-hitting academic study from the International Journal of Financial Management and Economics.
Yeah, and that's the source that essentially proves, with hard data, why our brains are evolutionarily wired to lose money in the stock market.
Which is rough to hear. And to pair with that dry academic data, we also have a transcript of a conversation between Tim Ferriss and Morgan Housel. Housel's the author of The Psychology of Money. And let me tell you, the stories in there are wild.
Oh, they are.
Stuff about skipping gold coins into the ocean, valet parking Ferraris.
They're incredibly entertaining, sure, but they really illustrate the core mission of this deep dive, because we aren't here to give you stock tips.
Right. No hot tips today.
We aren't looking at charts. We are unpacking the psychology of wealth. We're going to look at how your behavior matters so much more than your ability to, say, read a complex spreadsheet.
Which is honestly great news for me, because I tend to panic sell the moment CNN uses a red font on their ticker.
Well, and I'm here to explain the wiring that makes you do exactly that.
Perfect. So let's start with the academic side. That study from the International Journal of Financial Management and Economics. They draw this hard line in the sand between classical finance and behavioral finance. Now, I always thought finance was just math, so what's the actual beef there?
So it's a fundamental disagreement about what a human being actually is. Classical finance is this elegant, beautiful theory. It assumes investors are completely rational. It assumes that when you make a money decision, you are basically a computer.
Beep boop, maximizing profits.
Exactly. You analyze all the available information, you calculate the risk, and you make a choice that maximizes your utility.
Which, if you have ever met a human being, or specifically me in a casino, you know is completely false.
All right, it's a nice thought, but it's not reality. Classical finance looks at how money should move. Behavioral finance, on the other hand, looks at how money actually moves. It admits that we are irrational, we're emotional, and we're prone to systematic errors.
Yeah.
The study actually highlights 3 big cognitive biases that constantly trip us up.
Okay, let's walk through these traps so everyone listening knows what to watch out for. The first one they mention is overconfidence. And I have to say, I feel this one deeply. When the market is going up, I suddenly feel like I'm Warren Buffett's smarter nephew.
That is exactly how it works. Overconfidence is the belief that you can predict the future or that you somehow have an edge over the market. The study points out that this leads directly to excessive trading.
Like day trading.
Yeah. You read one article about a new tech company, and suddenly you think you know more than the hedge funds running billion-dollar algorithms.
Oh, I'm guilty of that. I read a headline and think, oh, I definitely know what's going to happen next.
And because you think, you trade, you buy, you sell. But the data in this study is brutal on this. It shows that the more you trade, the lower your returns usually are.
Wow.
Because you're racking up fees, you're triggering tax events, and you're usually buying high and selling low without even realizing it.
So we think we're playing 3D chess, but we're actually just setting our money on fire.
Pretty much.
What's the second trap?
Loss aversion. This comes from something called prospect theory, and this is the one that really messes with your head. Basically, the pain of losing $100 is far more intense than the joy of gaining $100.
Oh, absolutely. Like, if I find $20 in an old coat pocket, I'm like, nice, free burrito money.
Yeah.
But if I lose $20, it ruins my whole afternoon. I'm retracing my steps. I'm frustrated.
Right. That emotional asymmetry causes a very specific disaster in investing. People hold on to losing stocks way too long.
Because if I don't hit the sell button, it's not a real loss yet, right?
Exactly. You're holding on, hoping for a rebound just to get back to even, mostly so you don't have to admit to yourself that you were wrong.
Yeah.
But conversely, when a stock goes up, you sell it way too early because you're absolutely terrified of losing that gain.
So you end up cutting your flowers and watering your weeds.
That's a perfect metaphor. You're keeping the losers and selling the winners.
Makes total sense. And the third bias.
Herd mentality. If everyone is buying crypto or the latest tech stock, your brain just screams that it must be safe to do it too.
FOMO is a incredibly powerful drug. And the study actually had some specific numbers on this, didn't it?
They did. They surveyed a bunch of investors and found that 78.4% of respondents rely on previous experiences or anchoring when making decisions.
Wow, almost 80%.
Yeah, essentially we drive by looking in the rearview mirror. And the study confirmed that fear and greed are the primary emotional drivers. Fear causes panic selling during the downturns, and greed causes reckless risk-taking during the booms.
So, scientifically speaking, we are hardwired to fail. We're overconfident, we hate losing so much that we make terrible decisions, and we follow the herd right off a cliff.
That's the harsh reality of the data, yeah.
Okay, so that's the bad news. But let's bridge this over to the real world. In that conversation with Morgan Housel, he makes this incredible comparison between two specific investors to explain how real wealth is actually built, despite all these mental flaws.
Right.
He compares Warren Buffett to a guy named Jim Simons. Now, I obviously know Buffett, everyone does, but who is Jim Simons?
Jim Simons is an absolute legend in the quant world. He runs Renaissance Technologies, he's a code breaker, a brilliant mathematician. He basically built the black box that solves the stock market.
So he's the smart guy from our intro, the genius.
He is the smartest guy in the room. And get this, since 1988, Jim Simons has generated returns of about 66% annually.
Wait, hold on. 66% a year, consistently.
Consistently.
That sounds like a Ponzi scheme. Those are Bernie Madoff numbers.
It sounds totally impossible, but it is real. It's the greatest track record in the history of finance. Now compare that to Warren Buffett. Buffett's annual return is roughly 22%.
Okay, let's do the math here for you guys listening. Simons is doing 66%. Buffett is doing 22. Simons is literally tripling Buffett's performance every single year.
Yeah.
So Simons must be, what, 10 times richer than Buffett?
You would naturally think so. But here is the punchline. Warren Buffett is significantly wealthier.
Make that make sense. If I'm earning 66% on my money, I should own the entire planet by now. Where is the disconnect?
That's the math of time. Jim Simons didn't really find his stride with investing until he was 50 years old. Warren Buffett started investing when he was 10 years old.
10?
10. He's been compounding his money for roughly 80 years.
So Simons had a much higher top speed, but Buffett has just been driving the car for 80 years.
Precisely. And Housel drops this stat in the interview that just breaks your brain. 99% of Warren Buffett's wealth was accumulated after his 50th birthday.
Get out. 99%.
Yep. And 97% came after age 65.
That is.
If Buffett had retired at 60 to go play golf, which is a perfectly normal retirement age, you would have never heard of him. He would just be some obscure upper-middle-class guy in Omaha.
That is wild. We worship him as this genius stock picker, but his real superpower is just not stopping.
It's endurance. Pure endurance. Howes makes the point that the human brain just does not understand exponential growth. We understand linear math. If I ask you what 8 plus 8 plus 8 is, you know it instantly.
24.
Right. But if I ask you what 8 times 8 times 8 times 8 is...
My brain shuts down. I need my phone calculator.
Exactly. Compounding is completely non-intuitive.
The big takeaway here is that you don't actually need the highest returns.
Yep.
You don't need to be Jim Simons doing 66%. You just need the best returns that you can stick with for the longest possible period of time. Survival matters more than brilliance. Survival. Just sticking with it. That concept brings us to another story Housel told, which I think is just tragic, but so illuminating for anyone trying to build wealth.
Yeah.
It's the tale of the two investors. One is a janitor and one is a tech multimillionaire.
This is the ultimate example of behavior versus income. On one side, you have Ronald Reed. He was a janitor and a gas station attendant in Vermont. He made a tiny salary his entire life, but he saved whatever he could. He bought blue chip stocks, and he just waited.
For decades.
Right. He died at age 92 with over $6 million in the bank, which he mostly left to charity.
A janitor with $6 million just from waiting. And then you have the other guy.
The other guy. So Housel tells this story from his time working as a valet parker in Los Angeles in the early 2000s. He remembers this tech executive, young, brilliant, incredibly wealthy. He would carry around a literal stack of $100 bills a few inches thick.
Just walking around with a brick of cash in his pocket.
A brick of cash. And he wasn't exactly investing it. Housel tells the story of how this guy sent a valet down to a jewelry store to buy gold coins, $1,000 gold coins.
Okay.
And then he and his buddies went to the end of a pier and threw them into the Pacific Ocean just to see how far they could skip them like rocks.
Wait, literally throwing money into the ocean, that is a level of arrogance I can't even comprehend.
Because to him, money was just a toy. It was a game. He had plenty of it. Until he didn't. Housel found out later that the guy went completely broke.
It's the janitor versus the genius again. But Housel calls this the man in the car paradox, right? This behavior of constantly flashing wealth.
Yes, and this is the crucial psychological trap for you to understand. Housel observed that when he was a valet, people would pull up in these beautiful Ferraris or Rolls Royces. And he noticed something funny about his own reaction. He didn't look at the driver and think, wow, that guy is cool.
He looked at the car.
He looked at the car and thought, if I had that car, people would think I am cool.
That is profound. And also kind of sad when you think about it. We buy all this expensive stuff to get respect and admiration from others, but the stuff doesn't actually get us the respect. People just use our stuff to fantasize about themselves.
Exactly. Nobody cares about your possessions as much as you do. And this leads to Housel's big distinction between being wealthy and being rich. Rich is your current income. It's what you spend. It's the jewelry, the cars, the visible stuff. Wealth is what you don't see.
Wealth is the money you didn't buy the car with.
Right. It's the money sitting in the bank. It's the investments compounding in the background. It's the option to retire early. The guy throwing coins in the ocean was rich, but he wasn't wealthy. Ronald Reed, the janitor, was wealthy, but he certainly didn't look rich.
I love that. Wealth is what you don't see. But building that hidden wealth is hard because our brains fight us every step of the way. Which brings us to a conflict Housel talks about, reasonable versus rational. This part actually made me feel a lot better about my own money choices.
Yeah, this connects right back to that academic study. Academic finance, the rational side, says you should always maximize your mathematical returns. But psychology, the reasonable side, says you should maximize your ability to sleep at night.
And the main example he used was his own house mortgage.
Right. Morgan Housel paid off his mortgage. Now, if you talk to a purely rational financial advisor, especially a few years ago when interest rates were basically zero, they would scream at you for doing that.
I'd say it's terrible math.
They'd say, that's cheap money. Keep the mortgage, take the cash, and invest it in the S&P 500. You'll make the spread. Mathematically, paying off the mortgage is the wrong decision.
But he did it anyway.
He did, because he said it gave him a profound sense of security and independence. It made him feel safe. And if you feel safe, you're a lot less likely to panic during a market crash. So being reasonable, doing what makes you feel secure, actually helps you stay in the game longer than trying to be perfectly rational.
There was another example in the sources about leverage that really drove this home for me, the Yale study.
Oh, yes. Researchers at Yale crunched the numbers and said that young people should use 2-to-1 leverage in their retirement accounts. Basically, they should borrow money to invest when they're young.
So for every dollar I have, I borrow another dollar to put in the market.
Right. Because you have so much time to recover if things go south, mathematically, this strategy blows everything else out of the water. It leads to massive, massive wealth over time.
But nobody actually does that.
Because it's psychologically impossible. Imagine you're 25, you use this strategy, and the market drops 50%. Because you're leveraged 2-to-1, your entire net worth is wiped out.
Yeah.
You are back to absolute zero. Technically, the math says keep going, you'll recover. But in reality,
You'd vomit. You'd quit investing forever.
exactly. The rational strategy fails completely because it ignores the human element. You have to adopt a strategy you can actually stick with when things get ugly.
Speaking of things getting ugly, Housel introduced a concept called fee versus fine that really changed how I look at my own portfolio when it's down.
This is such a brilliant reframe. In life, we usually think that if we lose money or something bad happens, it's a fine. It means we did something wrong. We broke a rule.
Like getting a speeding ticket.
Right. So when the stock market drops 30%, we instinctively think, I made a mistake. I picked the wrong stocks. I need to fix this right now.
And that feeling is what leads to the panic selling. I just need to stop the pain.
But Housel suggests viewing volatility, those big, scary market drops, not as a fine, but as a fee. Think about going to Disneyland.
Okay, at the Magic Kingdom.
You pay over $100 just to get through the gate. Does that ticket price guarantee you a perfect, stress-free day?
Definitely not.
No. It guarantees long lines, it guarantees heat, it guarantees screaming kids and overpriced churros.
The misery is just part of the package.
Exactly. But you don't get to the front of the line at Space Mountain and say, hey, I waited in line for an hour, I want my money back. You accept the wait as the fee for the ride.
I see where you're going with this. The market drop is the line.
Yes. The 30% drop that happens every decade or so, that's just the admission fee for the long-term returns. If you view it as a fee, you don't panic. You just say, okay, the bill came due, I'm paying it, I'm staying on the ride.
That is surprisingly comforting. It completely shifts your mindset from I messed up to this is just the cost of doing business.
Precisely.
So we've covered the biases, the power of time, the trap of status, and the need to be reasonable. But let's zoom out for a second. What is the actual end game here? If it's not just to buy a Ferrari to impress people who don't even care about us, what is all this money for? Housel has a very specific answer to this. Autonomy.
This is the so what of the whole discussion. Housel argues that money's greatest intrinsic value isn't buying stuff. It's its ability to give you control over your own time, to wake up in the morning and say, I can do whatever I want today.
He told a story about his dad, the ER doctor, right?
Yes. His father was an ER doctor, which is an incredibly high-stress job. But unlike his colleagues, his dad lived way below his means. He saved aggressively. He didn't have that lifestyle bloat that most doctors fall into with the giant houses and the country club memberships.
And that frugality gave him an escape hatch.
Exactly. When the job became too stressful, when the hospital politics got bad, he just quit. He didn't have to worry about the massive mortgage on a mansion. His colleagues couldn't do that. They were totally trapped by their own expensive lives. They were rich, but they had absolutely no autonomy. His dad had wealth, which bought him his freedom.
That distinction, seeing money as a safety net versus money as fuel, is huge. And it gets even more complicated when we talk about passing that money down to the next generation. We touched on the janitor leaving millions to charity, but what happens when you leave millions to your kids?
This brings us to the Vanderbilt warning. Housel talks about Cornelius Vanderbilt. At one point, he was one of the richest men in human history. But he left his heirs this enormous fortune that acted as fuel for their lifestyles, not a safety net.
And they didn't exactly handle it well, did they?
They blew it spectacularly.
Yeah.
They started this insane social arms race with each other. They built monuments to their own egos, like the Biltmore Estate, which is a 175,000 square foot house.
Who needs that much house?
Nobody. They rarely even visited it. They just built it to prove that they could. They engaged in these intense social competitions to see who could spend more. And because the money was just fuel for their ego, it burned out. Within a few generations, the massive fortune was effectively gone.
It's amazing to think you can blow a fortune that size, but there was one descendant who turned out okay, right?
Anderson Cooper, the CNN anchor. He is a Vanderbilt descendant, but he has spoken openly about how he didn't rely on a trust fund. He built his own career. He has his own autonomy. He didn't fall into the trap of using money as a scorecard.
Which brings us back around to Warren Buffett. He seems to have the perfect rule of thumb for this whole parenting dilemma.
Buffett says you should leave your children enough money so that they feel they could do anything, but not so much that they could do nothing.
That is such a delicate balance. Enough to be a safety net so they can take a risk, be an artist, start a business, but not enough to just sit on a beach and rot.
Exactly. It goes right back to the janitor versus the gold coin thrower. It's about character, endurance, and actually understanding the purpose of the money.
Okay, let's wrap this up. We have covered a ton of ground today. If we distill all of this down, what are the big takeaways for you listening right now?
First, you have to acknowledge that you are wired for failure. Your brain wants to herd, it wants to be overconfident, and it strongly hates losing. You have to build systems like automatic savings to protect yourself from your own biology.
Second, time is the magic ingredient. You don't need 66% returns. You just need to survive for 80 years. Don't interrupt the compounding.
Third, don't confuse being rich with being wealthy. Spending money just to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money.
And finally, aim to be reasonable, not rational. Pay off the mortgage if it helps you sleep. View the market crash as a fee, not a fine. And remember that the ultimate goal is autonomy, not just accumulating stuff.
That's it. It's about survival and freedom.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought, something to chew on that kind of hovers over all these stories. We talked about the goalposts moving. We talked about the guy throwing gold coins. The biggest risk to your financial happiness isn't the stock market crashing. It's you moving your own goalposts.
Right. Because if you get a raise and you immediately raise your lifestyle to match it, you never actually get ahead. You never achieve that autonomy. You're just running faster on the exact same treadmill.
So the provocative question for you is, can you define your enough? Because if you can't define what enough looks like, you are running a race that has no finish line. Are you saving for a bigger life or just a bigger ego?
That is definitely the question to answer.
Thanks for deep diving with us today. We'll see you next time.